the other night John was here and we were sitting on the back porch and I was in my feelings and just having a moment. And there's like these, it was nighttime and there were lightning bugs and there was also like, I guess, crickets. And then there was this other enormous sound. And I was like, wait, what is that sound? And he was like, I think it's frogs. And I was like, I think you're right. Like, that was my first instinct as well. And we started talking about frogs, and I was like, but they're really loud. I was like, where do you think they're coming from? And paused for a second, and he goes, I bet they're in that big trash can that's just sitting there collecting water. So a few houses down from me, they're doing like a big reconstruction on the house, and they have one of those giant, you know, trash cans that you can rent, and they're throwing all their labor work stuff in there. And I was like, you could be right. He was like, yeah, when it rains, it just fills up with water, and frogs could be in there. And I was like, that's crazy. And he was like, do you want to walk down there and look? I was like, okay. And so we walk down there, and the sound is getting louder. Ribbit, 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 ribbit. And as soon as we get up there and like look in, and I'm like, oh my gosh, you're right. It was the frogs. It gets completely silent. All the frogs were like, be quiet. Somebody's here. I was like, did you hear that? They all just stopped talking. It was so weird. I didn't see one frog in there. Didn't see any, but it was murky and nasty in there. And then as we walked away, we heard a ribbit, and then a couple other were like, ribbit, ribbit. And they started back up again. I don't know why, but that just thrilled me. I was in my 20s and I was on really heavily dependent on substances, drugs. And we used to go to this lady's house and get pills. And we went over there, and she had a daughter who was like 9 or 10 years old. And I was young, like in my early 20s. And so, you know how that age just kind of gravitates towards what they consider cool older girls. And I used to love this kid and I would play with her. Every time we'd go over there, my boyfriend would go handle business and I would go see her. And I would sit in her bedroom and she would tell me everything that was going on. And like her mom had addiction. And you could tell that she didn't get as much attention that as she deserved. And we would just sit and play and we would play those hand games, like what are they called? With the you know what I'm talking about. We would play those games and then we would make up dances and play music and like we would do those together. And so every time we pulled up in the driveway, she would come shooting out the door and she'd be like, Amanda! And like I'd be like, what's up, babe? And we would always play and it was so much fun. And I don't really know whatever happened to her, but it was in Conway off Highway 378 and she would have been 9 or 10 in maybe like 2003, 2002. So if that's you, hit me up. When I was in prison, there was only one job you had to actually apply for, and it was the Get Smart team. And I had gotten hired on this Get Smart team. And what would happen, it would be two females and three males. The only time males and females would mix was on this van. The captain or the sergeant would be the driver. And we would go to different schools and we would go to courthouses for like PTI and we would all get up and tell our story and we had a certain amount of time. So like if the program was an hour long, we accounted for an opening from the captain or the sergeant, and then all of us would divide the rest of the time and we would go up there and deliver our story, our crime prevention story, and then we would sit back down until it was over. And like I had just started and we were going to a PTI. And like I was getting out there because what they would do is they would get out there and they'd be like, if I had only known that if I was continuing to shoplift and smoke weed, I would have been in prison. I never would have. Like they would just go out there with like all this fierceness, you know? And I was like, okay, like I can do that. And like I'm a little sassy, you know? And so I got out there and I would just tell my story. And I was like telling them, don't do drugs. And I'm, you know, whatever. And so there was two workers, the sergeant and the captain. And so far I'd only been out with the sergeant. And at the end of every event that we did on the way back to the prison in the van, we would all go around one by one and critique and say things that could be better, offer suggestions, like remark on the things that person did really well. And I had been getting good positive feedback. So it was time for the captain to take us to a PTI. And I was excited because she was the one who hired me. And I just felt closer to her. Like I wanted to impress her. So I get out there, so nervous because she's listening, you know. And I get out there and like I give my talk. And at the end, we're all wrapping up and we go to the bathroom and we're washing our hands. And she confronts me in the bathroom. And she says, there was the other girl was in there too. She was like, "What was that?" And I was like, "What was what?" And she was like, "You just replicated what every other person on the team does. I hired you for this team because you are unique. You have the advantage of being able to present as soft spoken, naive, young, and share a message to other girls or young men who don't think they're ever going to go to prison either." She was like, "You need to play that up. Don't try to be all tough. Instead, go out there and just tell your story like it is." And I started doing that, and it was so much better. So I had been working on the team for like a year, and we went to this church one night. And we all spoke at the church. We loved doing churches. A lot of times, they would feed us like a dinner, and it was just a lot. We just loved speaking at churches, you know, like they were so nice. And so we spoke at this church, but they recorded our talks. They couldn't take pictures of us, but they could record our voices. And they gave the captain a copy of our talk. And on the way back to the prison, it was like a 2 hour drive. On the way back, we listened to our talks, and everybody did so good. And then here comes my talk. And I sound so pathetic. My little voice is so quiet, and I'm just telling my story. And I was mortified listening to myself tell my story. And it was dark, so nobody could see me, but I just cried. And we got out of the van. We were at a rest stop. We got out of the van, and the captain stopped me before I went up the sidewalk. She said, "What's wrong?" And I was like, "Nothing, I'm good." She was like, "Care Bear, what's wrong?" And I was like, "I don't know. Everybody else did so good. Like, their stories are so powerful. Like, I'm just disappointed hearing mine." And she was like, "You listen up good." She said, are, you have the gift of authenticity. You speak straight from your heart. When you speak, people listen. God has given you that gift." She made me feel so good. She said, "Out of everyone, you're the one who has natural talent at public speaking." Y'all,